So we're going to make sure we go out with a bang, that's for sure. So as with before, any questions, I'll keep my eye out, so just raise your hand. If not, I'll pause every now and then to see if there are any in the room. But we're going to start today. We're talking about what DE&I means to us. So my personal perception massively changed last year after attending an event in the US where Leslie Andrews from JLL explained in such an articulate way the difference between equality and equity. But we're not here to listen to me, so I'd like to open to the panel then. Blythe, did you want to kick us off with what this means to you?
Yes, thank you. So DE&I, in a simplistic answer, is fair treatment of everybody in the workplace. We all know that it's got way more facets than that, or I should say most of us know. So what I'd like to do is just read. I think people forget that it stands for 3 different things: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in my opinion, diversity in the workplace is the acceptance and inclusion of employees of all backgrounds. A diverse workplace is an important asset as it acknowledges the individual strengths of each employee and the potential they bring. Equity is the fair treatment, access, and advancement for each person in an org. Equity involves issues related to pay, opportunities for growth, and fairness in the daily workday. And then inclusion is a culture in which a mix of people come to work. They feel comfortable and confident to be themselves and work in a way that suits them while delivering the business needs.
Yeah, I mean, I would mirror that. I think it's quite simply just creating an environment of inclusivity where enabling people to be successful regardless of their differences. That is easier said than done when you think about the different elements of multiculturalism, multi-generational, visible. Some are not visible to us, right? People may have disabilities that are not visible to us. So I think organizations, that's really, it's quite difficult to create that environment, but for me, that's what it means. How we achieve it is for further discussion.
Yeah, thank you. So for me and for Talent Beyond Boundaries, I'd start with equity, and what we do is work to create a world in which labour mobility and skilled travelling for work is equitable for displaced people and refugees. So we're working with government to actually first off start with creating visa programs or opening up existing visa programs so that people who are vulnerable, people who are displaced can access the same sort of labour opportunities that many of us can. And so by doing that, we as an organisation are a facilitator of diversity and inclusion.
So just by show of hands in the audience, who in their organisation has a DE&I policy today? So like just over half. So back to the panel, how can we as organizations ensure that DE&I is deeply rooted into our culture and values?
Culture starts from the top. So your people leaders are critically important in educating the rest of the business, right? So we have a great program in my organization, giving employees access to what we've created as different resource groups. You don't actually have to be part of that community to be part of that resource group. It's bringing people together to talk about DE&I and how we can make a difference in our organization. But I think inclusivity is really key in all of that. And yeah, it really starts at the top of the tree, really, and ensuring that your leadership this is embodied in everything that they do.
I'd echo that it needs to start with leadership, that diversity needs to happen at the top, and then it needs to align with your mission statement and your culture and your values of your company. With Pinterest, our mission is to create a life, to give everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. So we follow that with our DEI policy.
Yeah, sure. So I guess DE&I as well for us, in particular, working with employers starts from recruitment. So it's the simple things like looking at CVs, the interview process, and some particular challenges that candidates going through our program would face. Might be that Syrian individuals, Syrian men in particular, will have failed certain university courses in order to avoid compulsory military conscription. So there might be reasons for those sort of anomalies on their CVs. People in Lebanon might have really difficult access to electricity. We all know the issues there. So might not be able to have their camera on for a remote interview. So part of D&I and actually building in those inclusive programming starts from how do you recruit people from those backgrounds.
And so with regards, because we were discussing this earlier, weren't we? With regards to the CVs, we said, we were talking about how do we have them blind? And then to what extent is that a waste? Because at some point, that's going to be, you're going to have interviews, and then that's not going to be as objective.
Right, we were talking about that earlier, blind CVs, so there's no bias created, or unconscious bias for that matter. But as Jess and I were speaking, then you get to that point and you see the person, so then that creates that bias. So then are you just spinning your wheels? I don't know, it's definitely a debate.
Yeah, I think, in the recruitment phase around interviews in particular, there's always a focus of gender diversity, race diversity, whether that's the interview panel themselves or the interview candidates. But we're not thinking about the other elements, the invisible elements, right? And some of that was hidden during the pandemic because everything was online. But now some of these disabilities or differences are actually more visible now that we're back in person. So yeah, it is a challenge, right, for all organizations, I think. And also the method of the measurements are really focused around race, ethnicity, gender, but all the other elements aren't factored in, and they're still critically important. So, which
ties in beautifully to my next question, thank you, which is how can a company measure and track the progress in DE&I goals?
I think society it's a challenge, right? Today, companies are measured on the three elements that I've just shared, right? They're not measured on everything else because it's difficult to quantify. So I think, therefore, it's more important to focus on the culture within your own organizations, right? And really take this seriously, creating a specific department within your organization that takes ownership for this, right? And through colleague surveys, you can get feedback, right, as to how they're feeling. So yeah, it's a difficult one because we're not quite there yet on the measurement, and so I feel sometimes it's more of a box-ticking exercise than anything meaningful. So I think we need to be cautious about, earlier the show of hands. It'd be interesting to hear from some of those individuals who have these policies within their organizations. For me, policies have to be measurable, right? So how do you measure success if you have a policy in place, right? We talk about it very much within our organization, and there's a system, but I'd say policy is bordering on this is a mandatory thing that you have to comply with. So I'll be interested to hear from some of the audience actually later around how they're measuring their performance against their policy.
And we do a little data analysis on DE&I, but it's based on the applicant tracking system and then what an individual completes in our HRIS system. So some people don't feel safe saying they have a disability or disclosing certain things about their ethnicity or race. So it's hard to track. We track the information and data that we can. So I think another debate I'm going to bring up and challenge you with is how can we make employees feel safe to disclose that information?
Are there any thoughts or questions burning in the room?
Great conversation. My question is, how do you all individually challenge those unconscious biases? Because in order to make employees feel safe to express who they are, I think we all have them. How, I take my own sort of, steps to make sure that I have challenged those unconscious biases that I have. Would you be comfortable sharing any of your own personal sort of steps to challenge them?
Yeah, we definitely have training at work that's mandatory because I didn't realize I had unconscious bias until these trainings. So I'm like, oh. And then I've been challenged myself for people to say, well, you're a white woman that grew up in America. You have all these opportunities. I'm like, wait, I've had to work really hard. But then I take a step back and go, I have had things afforded to me that other individuals haven't. So for just lack of better words, I try to put myself in check daily. And these employee experiences, because I'm a global mobility manager, about their challenges with just moving and going to different locations and the stress involved.
Yeah, for me, there's a personal element, and then what I do myself in my day job. I'm actually from Northern Ireland, Belfast, Catholic, so grew up there where there was a lot of prejudice. Then relocated to South Africa and lived there during the apartheid. So again, experienced prejudice. And so that's kind of had a real impact on me as an individual. I've been lucky to go back to South Africa as an adult and actually be exposed to, which I wasn't, I was shielded from growing up there, being exposed to what other communities actually suffered whilst I was living there, and it actually really hits you to go, like, why didn't I know about this? You actually feel an enormous amount of guilt about that. So in my role, I have a global team, and I make sure that the most junior people in my team have access to me. So I have skip level sessions with them quarterly, and I make them feel like any time open to come and speak to me. In fact, we have one colleague who's worked for me for about 5 years in our India operation who's actually deaf. So she has limited capacity to be able to deliver her day job, but we make allowances for that. So yeah, I do personally take it very, very, I hold myself accountable and responsible as a people leader to make people feel comfortable. And my door is always open. And I think that's really, really important, because speaking up is a real, real challenge. And that goes back to the inclusivity piece. And it's a huge focus in my organization at the moment.
Yeah, hi. So I've been working in this sort of sector in sort of refugee development work for 9 years, my whole career really, and I've definitely learned so much along that journey. A lot about, policy landscapes, a lot about, the legal infrastructure and operational side of things. But, the most you can ever learn is from, obviously the individuals with lived experience of sort of receiving these solutions, moving for these reasons. And I guess a lot of the time I've noticed my own assumptions. Oh, well, this is a great opportunity for them because of X, Y, Z. And a lot of our programming is just building in, advisory mechanisms. So we, for example, now, we have advisory boards of alumni, people who've been through the program, who we consult with on, how we should deliver certain aspects of what we do, and really having those spaces to listen, spaces to soundboard, a lot of learning about sort of trauma-informed support. And I think that it's a continual learning journey, and just you can't segment people into situations either. So a refugee from one place might have an entirely different experience from somebody from another place, and then you factor in women, men, people from other sort of backgrounds. And so I think it's just about creating the spaces, taking the advice, and being comfortable with being challenged.
So I'm just going to, we have a question.
Thank you very much. Ladies, you started out by talking and agreeing that comes from the top. We set the precedents from the top. In your roles, I would really like you to, you've been very honest so far, I think, about everything, and I love that. I'd like you to honestly tell us how you influence the top to possibly change their ways. Because I sometimes worry about who tells the top to change. Is it you ladies, or who is it?
I unfortunately don't have a lot of value add to the top. I have a manager that I give my feedback to, and then you can tell I'm honest here. I'm very honest in the quarterly surveys that go out as well, and I do attach my name to those. So if they want to come back with questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm always up to challenge people, including leadership.
I wish I was that person that could tell leadership what to do, but I'm not sure I'd be sitting in this seat representing my organisation. So, yeah, no, seriously, I think our organisation actually does pretty well. On this agenda, you often hear some of our senior leaders talking about it. So, I actually think we're on a journey, an evolution, and I've certainly seen over the last 3 or 4 years, this is a more visible topic, and people are becoming more comfortable talking about it at a senior leadership level, and they're very active. So I don't think I necessarily need to influence them. I think they're just being influenced by, it's an expectation now. So, and I'm seeing it certainly in the culture of the organization as well.
So I'm just going to take a moment now to shift the mindset a little bit of DE&I and ask the audience again by show of hands, who has a displaced individual policy or initiative within their organization? Okay, we have one. You're the winner. No. So I'm going to tell you some very shocking facts, which is that today there are more forcibly displaced individuals than there ever have been in human history. There are over 100 million displaced individuals. Over 30 million of those are refugees, which if we take 1 minute of our time today to think about that potential loss of talent and skill because of the situations that they find themselves in outside of their control. So some of those reasons, hunger, climate change, gender, sexual orientation, these are everyday situations that could really impact any of us. And at any point, us or our loved ones could find themselves in a situation like these tens and 100 million people, in that they find themselves in situations that they were not expecting to be. Oh, not yet. So I really now want to focus a little bit on how we could support these individuals, and then as well the benefits that this brings to our organizations, and that's with a focus, of course, on D&I. So Holly, I wanted to ask you, what efforts can a company take to recognize and leverage the skills of displaced individuals in the workplace?
Yeah, obviously we facilitate an environment where companies can recruit displaced talent. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of Talent Beyond Boundaries, but we work in source countries, or what we refer to as source countries, but typically Jordan and Lebanon. We've got the majority of our team. We also work in Pakistan. We're working in South America as well. And we have a database now of over 70,000 people, and that's building quite rapidly. And that is of displaced individuals with skills, with experience, sort of looking for these opportunities. So for a company to engage with us, you know, we work to do sort of a talent matching system to offer then sort of mobility and relocation services to countries in which we've got visas and pilots in place that tackle some of those initial barriers. I think that, you know, we've talked a little bit about the recruitment process and how you can build an inclusive recruitment process to recruit refugees, but then actually preparing for that mobility. We've talked generally about, you know, today, travel relocation and you know, flight bookings, things like that. The sorts of things you might have to consider for our candidates would be that the challenges somebody might have at the airport without an exit permit. So if you're not legally registered in a country because you've fled Syria, you're in Lebanon, you don't have a permit to be there. Once you're exiting that country, you might be asked to pay a certain amount of fees. So we do things like partner with the International Organization for Migration, who actually provide transit services. So they're the UN body for migration, and they provide transit services for our candidates. So it's really thinking about every step along the journey, what challenge may come up, and putting supportive processes in place. And then finally, just being open and being engaged to, again, that learning experience. Taking on training sessions to sort of prepare for your new recruits.
And what are some of the advantages to supporting displaced individuals?
Yeah, I mean, so we have been programming in the UK now for only 18 months, so quite a young program, and we've just reached over 500 individuals to benefit from a solution through this program. So that's primary applicants and their families as well. And within that programming, 12 months on, I think we've got 97% retention rate, so that is people still within that first employer. The candidates that we work with, as you can imagine, are some of the most resilient people you will come across, some of the most resourceful people that you will come across because of their migrant journey and their experience. And I'll give an example. So we have, obviously this growing alumni network of candidates already here, and an advisory committee within them who support new arrivals. So that's people who've already been through the program, who are working here, and are now providing advice to newcomers. So we have a candidate in particular who started doing every Friday tips for, and we connect everyone through Slack, and he does a Friday fix. And one of his topics recently was just budgeting. And so he is a nurse in London, pretty low salary, and he has done this whole video and tools to promote budgeting tips for new arrivals. And I learned so much. So I think some of the aspects that people can uncover and identify when they're new here can be of benefit to everyone.
And so then just how, in general, can companies ensure that they're inclusive of all individuals?
Yeah, I guess some of the main tips or aspects we would see are things like building an inclusive holiday calendar. So taking into consideration people's different religions. Are you going to give them time at Eid rather than Christmas? And we as an organization have sort of floating public holidays, so you can choose your public holidays based on, whatever sort of religious or cultural holiday suits you. Creating sort of culturally appropriate social events. So we obviously quite commonly kind of create Christmas parties, or we create social engagements themed around alcohol, and thinking about people's different backgrounds and why that might not be appropriate is really sort of important to do as well. In terms of the mobility space, just the small sort of touches of somebody coming to a new country that they've often never been on a plane before, they've never been to sort of a city this vast, and small things like having a buddy who is somebody at work but also can help them integrate in a more social sort of setting can be really important, and that might just be showing them where Tesco is. What is Tesco? What's Tesco's? How do I open a bank account? Attending appointments with people. My colleague Maria, our integration lead, she's in the audience here, recently visited a couple who had just landed from Afghanistan, and went to visit them in their serviced accommodation, and she was scared to leave. She was scared to leave because she didn't think women could be on the street alone. And Maria going and visiting as a single woman alone, reinforced that she was like, oh, so I can leave. I didn't believe my husband that women can, walk around on the street. So all those sort of little aspects, and there's been quite a lot of talk that's been really valuable today about partners and thinking about families, and that's especially true in this sector too.
I think another thing is ERG, employee resource groups, and that's one thing I failed to mention. I have been an ally and joined groups. It took me a while because I created my own bias and thought I would be judged because I wasn't part of that, but I realized I could be an ally. So that's an avenue I've gone down as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar in our organization as well. These employee resource groups I was talking about earlier, you can be an ally. You don't have to, it's not necessarily linked to me as an individual, but you can be party to it and be an ally, support.
And one thing I'll add is Pinterest. I don't know has anybody heard of an ombuds program? I don't know if it's this way, just in the Americas, but it's a program that is outside of HR, BPs, or ER. They report directly into our CEO. And it's a group of 3 people, but it's where an employee can go and have that inclusivity, yeah, I can say that word, and it not be shared, and they can talk you through your issues that you've come across with DEI. And then if you want to take that to a manager or someone else, they will help be part of that conversation with you. So that's how we've tried to create a safe space at Pinterest.
I think just one thing I'd like to just finish on that point is, we talked about it in earlier sessions around travel and mobility programs and building that in the DE&I piece into your, I think there's still work to be done on that for sure. I don't think anyone, I mean, I'd be happy to be challenged by people, but I think that's an ever-evolving challenge for us that we need to solve for, especially for the invisible differences, right? And not making presumptions that one size fits all, because we make allowances for female travelers, but that's just really one small element. There's so much more.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Thank you very much. So I really hope that this session has given everybody a wider scope, a wider angle around some additional issues to DE&I. So I'm going to conclude the session on some success stories before we thank the panel.
When we were in Afghanistan, when Taliban came, the woman couldn't have a job. And now in Australia, I have job I have salary, I'm independent now, and I'm making contribution here.
I feel like I'm born again. It's a new life for me. I will not worry about my son's future anymore.
Back in my home country, I had personal goals and plans related to my career. After they stamped the visa and I saw it, I felt that this is my personal breakthrough and that it's time to make actions and to prove to myself that I can do it. Dreams do come true.
There are so many skilled refugees in the camps and their lives are wasted. I think it's really good opportunity for companies that they want skilled people. When you're working here in Australia, you know you have rights to work and you are sure that you're getting paid.
My family are happy about my settlement in the UK, especially that I'm able now to pursue a higher educational degree and I'm working in one of the best hospitals in the UK.
From the first day for me here, I found they are really awesome. I have a dreams, I have plans, I have a future goals.
And so if you could just join me then in thanking Blythe, Alison and Holly.